Okay, we're back. It is COMP305, fall 2016. It's week 4, part 3 of our broadcast at Centennial. Just finished talking about a couple things. We have our game controller in play. Bring up Unity for a second. Simple sounds. But we don't have any way of scoring yet. And this is the UI portion of add elements here on the top part of my screen. I'm going to add a new UI inside my hierarchy. And the way to do that is right click, okay, and then click text. What this is going to do on the game is it has this new text right here. In the scene, it looks like this. So actually what I have is a text object that's buried right in the middle of my screen. It's not really that visible. So I think the way to make it more visible for us, right, is first of all, I'm going to focus on it. So I'm going to press the F key to frame select. And this is what the UI would look like. In fact, I have something called a canvas that automatically gets generated in the event system. Okay, I want to get rid of those for a second. Try again. So I'm going to just get rid of those two pieces, and then just do it again. So you can see the second time. So I'm going to right click again. And then all of a sudden, when I do that, bam, all that stuff gets put into place. Okay, because for the UI that is in the new version of Unity, it creates this canvas container for you that holds the UI as well as an event system to take care of clicks and stuff like that. Okay, but I want this new text item. I want it to be my score. Or my lives. Let's do lives label first. So here's my lives label. And my lives label, notice that it also, even though it's a text object, it also has a transform. It's called a rect transform though, right? And if you click in the middle of this thing, take a look. Here's the middle of my rect transform. The ability for me to align it to a certain location so it can be responsive to viewport changes. Now for now, we're making a fixed viewport, but if we were doing an aspect type viewport, which we'll be doing in the next game, align to a corner. So I'm changing the center point of it from the middle to the corner, because that means if I was going to make my game wider, then the text would follow the what it's linked to or its position is a part of. I'm going to click on these buttons. By the way, the buttons, the shortcuts for my buttons up here are Q, W, E, R, T, the shortcuts, just like they are in Maya. So if I click on W, I want to move my right to the top left corner of my screen approximately. Can't see it still, it's really dark. Let's change the script type of my text. My font right now is Arial. Color is black. I think yellow might work better on a blue background. So let's do that. So we'll change it to yellow so we can see it. There's my new text object, 55. There we go. And let's, it's lives labels. Let's call it lives. And I'll start off with like 5 lives. That's what it'll look like this, right? But it's pretty ugly. Let's change the text type. So I'm going to go into my fonts folder, X51. Just drag and drop it into my font so it changes the way the font looks. If I can do it properly. And it's still pretty small. I want you to make this something bigger, like maybe 30. But if I make it 30, my height for my object is 30. So I got to change this to something like 50 or 40. There we go. For my whole label is 160. My height is 40. And if I zoom in here, so if I go to my lives label, double click and zoom in, you can see that it's at the top corner of my screen. Now, from a position perspective, it's about 100 and minus 33. I want to make this about 100, exactly 100 minus 30, just to make it exact. So if you want it to position like me, it's going to be at 100 and minus 30. Okay, if I go back to the game, this is what it looks like now. So when you think about your canvas, think about an overlay. Here's my overlay. This is my viewport right here, but this is what the canvas would look like. So whatever I have here relatively positioned on my canvas is going to appear the same way on my game, lives 5. I want to do the same thing, but instead of my lives label, I want to have a score label. So I'm going to right-click and duplicate. And we're going to kind of rename this one from lives label to score label. Change what it says from lives to score, and I'll start the score at 0. Can't be on this side. I want to make it relative to the other side, right? And I want to move this over so it pulls over to about here. I don't want to put it here because if you see it, I don't have a lot of room for numbers, right? Get like a score in the thousands. So I might as well put it over here to give myself room to score. Otherwise, it'll bounce around, right? So to change the width of my score label to, let's say, something like 200 or 250, let's say. That sounds about right. What you want to try and do is put a number in there other than 0. Like try 9999, right? 9999. Too big or too many numbers. You don't think someone's going to get that high score. Let's say they're going to get 9,000 points, which is not undoable, or 99,000 points. And now you know that 250 might be too big. So maybe 200 is okay. There we go. Now I can pull this over to the side a little bit. Look like. Let's put it back now from a sizing perspective back to 0. This is what it's going to start off with. Okay, I'm using the size to fill it up to see how big it is. I'm testing it ahead of time, my UI, so that I don't waste my time later. Let's see what it looks like. It looks like this. Okay, it's not bad. What I can do is, if I want to, when I play, notice that I can mute my audio on my play. I can do that so you don't hear the audio while I'm playing. This is okay for now because we know it's going to make sounds. Okay, what I'm really focusing here is the UI. The sounds, but now what I want is when I collide with the cloud or the island, what I want to do is I want to take off lives if I collide with my cloud, and I want to gain score when I collide with my islands, right? But how am I going to keep track of score? I can't do it with my plane, right? Because in my next scene, as an example, or maybe it's not the right idea. Maybe I want to make my plane my prefab one day. I'll make many planes. Maybe I want to make a enemy plane, or something like that. Or maybe I want to make a multiplayer game. So my plane is not always the best place. You want to kind of detach your score into something else. You could make a scoreboard controller, put it inside my game controller. So I recommend this. So let's go back to my game controller. And I'm going to double click on my scripts. So here's my scripts on my game controller. I want to do a couple things. First of all, in my private instance variables in my game controller, I want to have a place where my data is stored. Private int, and we're going to call it, we're going to go lives and score. My lives value is going to be where the first thing. Second thing is I want to have a private int that's a score value. So I have my lives value, score value. There we go. Okay. I want to have some public properties, and I'll tell you why I want public properties. These public properties are going to be accessible from outside of my script. So again, it's going to be public int, and now it's going to be lives, right? Value, capital V. And just like any property, public property, I want to have a getter and a setter. Okay. So my getter, this dot underscore lives value. So the actual value that I get from my lives data, the data that's stored in my private instance variable. This lives value with capital L is going to be the public face of my data in the back end. That's what it is. Now, if I want to set it, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say this dot underscore lives value is equal to the keyword value. assign something to with an equals operator to my lives value property, it's gonna actually assign it up here to lives value in setter. Why is this good? Because when I set the value, I can always update my label, update my lives label at the same time when I'm setting my value. So if I set a value to it, like 100, get it right away. As opposed to having different methods to do the same thing, I can do it with one method. Okay, what do I mean by that? Okay, let's do the score value first. So public int score value. It's gonna be a public property. We did this kind of last time as well. Setter. So get set. Inside my getter, I'm gonna have return dot underscore score value, and then over here I want to have a same idea as the other one. This dot underscore score value is equal to value, which is the keyword. Okay, well, how does this help us? Not yet. References to my labels. I want to have access to my labels. Well, I kind of create them in public instance variables for testing. Okay. And inside there, I'm going to start creating my labels, right? And we can certainly use the for us to split our on the inspector to create that little header if you really want to. But if I wanted to, I could do something like this. I could say something like, you know, header, my header, and then I could make the header attribute called is in a string. I could say something like my header is called labels, right? I could do something like this, right? What? Is this gonna be out? Is this too much for you?
Figure out if I don't allow it.
Okay, and it came out of my first tutorial, right? The first tutorial we did this. And then if you go public, that I want to have is there's two labels. There's a score label and a life label. And both of those are going to be text. But in order for me to get text, I have to add a UI. So inside this, here's my, I need to create a reference. Oops. I need to create a reference to the namespace. For me to do that, I'm going to go using Unity Engine .ui. I need to get that using statement in place. So then down here, I can say public text, which is my, right? And I want a public text that is my score label. Header here is just something that I'm going to decorate the inspector with. Heading, right? That's all it's going to do. If I go back and I click on game controller, and this is my live label and my score label. Okay, that's all I'm doing here. So my live label is here, here, and these are two text objects. So I'm going to make references by dragging and dropping. So it's my live label, and this is my score label. Them, right? And I've got access to my lives label and score label. When I set the value from my score or my lives, my lives label text. So example will be this dot lives label is equal to lives plus the value of my lives label, which is lives value, which I'm just getting right now. My lives value, and I update my scoreboard. And I do this in the setter because it's the easiest place to get it done. Same thing with the score value. So this got score label, text property of the score label is going to be score plus this dot underscore score value. The one I'm storing. So this is just my data reference. This is where I store my values. Right now, they don't have a value. And by default, I probably should, in my start method, because this is where we do everything, I can actually use the getters and setters. If I want to, I could say something like this dot score value, right, is equal to 0, which actually would trigger updated, right? And this dot lives value is equal to 5. Start method, because I want to initialize stuff in my start method. Okay, good. Let's check it out and see if it works. Go back, so press play. When I hit this, I should lose a life, right? Well, no. This just keeps track of what's happening. This makes it possible for me to do stuff with these two public properties. But I need to access these public properties in controller, because the plane controller is where all the hit detection happens, right? So if I need to access them, that means I have to have a reference to my game controller object, which means in my public instance variables for testing only, public controller, right? And then we'll call it game controller. Here's something, I'm aligning variables. I might as well do the same thing. I'll put my game controller first, and then I'll create another little thing like this that says header. For these ones, right, it'll be sounds. My, oops. I can break off my, or break apart my header and my inspector. So I have my sounds area and I have my game controller separate. Let's check this out. So if I go back to plane, it says sounds, and I need a reference to my game controller here. So I'm going to take my game controller right here and drag and drop it into my game controller. Okay, why do I need this? Because if I go back, now that I have a reference to my game controller, whenever I hit an island, this dot game controller, right, dot island score value, right, plus equals to, if I hit a cloud, this dot game controller dot lives value minus equals to 1. Remove a life when I hit a cloud, and I add score when I hit an island. Okay, let's check this out and see if it works. Now it should definitely work, right? Because I got the mechanism in place. I lose some life. Whoa, lost a lot of life there. And then here's my score, and some more score, and I lose a life, and some more. Oh, and now I'm at -2 and -3, and I have a trigger now where I can stop the game. Life can go to 0, right? And if my life can go to 0, then I can stop the game from functioning. I understand what I just did there. So and now I connected my UI into my game controller by creating references from my labels, this is my canvas, into my game controller. And then I create a public property, so when I access them from other scripts, I add score, it automatically updates my scoreboard. And I do that in the getter and setter, or actually in the setter, which is where that's why I'm using the setters how they should be used. I want to directly enter values in there because we have no control afterwards. The values there, then I have to set up another way of detecting that the value's changed, right? If I was going to do that without the getter and setter, I'd have to detect that the value's changed. Okay, if the value changes now, update the scoreboard. Well, I can do that in my getter and setter. So that's the best place to do it. Okay, now that I've got this, I want to add a way of stopping my game. I don't want to stop my game. I just want to make it so that I can't play anymore. I can't play my character anymore, right? And there's a couple ways to do this that are kind of tricky. What I do is do the following. I want to make it so, first of all, that I have a label that comes up that says game over. The label comes up game over only when the game is over, right? Okay, that's one. So first of all, I need another one of these. My score label, right? And why am I duplicated? Because I get up all my style is there. I've got my font. and the size. I don't have to redo any of that stuff. So let's call this game over label. There we go. Here's my game over label. I'm putting label in there because that's what I'm going to access later. I'm also going to change my my positioning to the middle. That's where I want it. And I might as well just reset to the middle. It will be there. And I can change this to say game over. Okay. Well, if I zoom out, you can see now that game over comes there, but it's kind of one over the other, which is not what I want. Why? Because the size of my game over label is, the width is 100 and the height's 100. Right. Here's what I want to do. I want to change my font size to, like, I don't know, 60 or 80. Let's go 60. That's pretty big. My game over width, right? I want to make it the width of my screen. All right. So my width is 640, so I'll make it 640. There it is. Okay, if I do that, so it takes up the whole width of my screen. Alignment controls to make it the middle. So it's exactly centered this way. I don't need it to be 100. It's only 60. I can make it 70 or 80, and it would be okay. Right? That's the height of my label. Right? And if I kind of zoom back, you can see that now. See these little boxes. You can see that the box is taking up the whole size of my screen. Then when I play my game, game over is going to fly over my screen all the time. I don't want that, right? I want my game over only to appear later on, and I want it to be not here now. Okay, that means I need control over it. If I need control over it, it's got to be in my game controller. As you see, I have these two labels in my game controller. I'm going to go back to my game controller and add a couple more labels, or this label here for now, and then another one. Labels, I want to add a reference to my game over label, so it's going to be a text object, game over label. There we go. The following game. So on start, I set my values for my labels, and then what I want to do is I want to do the following. I want to say this over label, right? Dot game object set active false. And what does this do? I set the game object to inactive, which means it's invisible. Okay. So I have to use the game object of the game over label because the game over label is just a text object, and it points to the game object itself, which is the game over label itself. Property is just a property, text, right? I'll go back. I still need to make that reference though. Go away and click back. You can see I have another space for game over label. I'm going to take my game over label from the UI and drag and drop it to make that reference. So now I have a reference to this thing right here. It's gone, right? Okay, how do I bring it back? If my score be strategic here, right? I want to be strategic. So I want to do a bunch of stuff. So I want to test for my score being 0 here. So if my value of my score, right here inside my setter, it's like a little method. If this dot underscore lives value or score value, that's the wrong place. That's if I want to gain lives. Here, if I want to die, I want to stop. If this dot underscore lives value equal to 0, right? Then what do I want to do? I want to call something called a method called end the game, right? I don't have that method yet, but I will. If everything else is okay, then do this. Then update my lives label and stuff. Otherwise, don't update because I'm not going to need to. There's less than 0. I don't want to show my live label anymore. Never mind, right? Okay, cool. So I want to do this end game thing. Call it right from my set method. So down under here, I'll make another area called public. I'll still make it private. So private void, and we'll call this thing underscore endgame. When I call the endgame method, what I want to do is I want to say something like this. I want to say that I want to make my game over label appear. Game over label dot game object dot set active. Right? Okay, but if that's true, let's see if it works. I'm going slow because I want you guys to get all this stuff. Play, play, play. Okay, so I die, I lost a life. And then lost a life, and then, well, game over. So that condition came up. See how it appeared after my game was over? Yay. But I can still play. Ever. This is kind of bad. Well, it does not update my label. See, what I did was I said, hey, don't update my label unless my lives are greater than 0. So I want to turn my label off. That's what I want to do, right? Interesting sound. We'll do this after this. I want to make a sound that goes do 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 do, something like that, right? Which we'll do. Okay, couple things. In order for me to, when the game ends, I want to kind of display my final score. So here's my game over label. I want to make another one. Score label. So final score label. There we go. Final score label. And this is going to say final score. Score, which could be 99999, let's say, right? Okay, cool. And what I want to do is I still want to make it centered, but I want to pull it down below the label like this, right? It's too big. I want to make it smaller than this, bigger than my score. My game over should be the biggest label there, and my final score should be centered around this. So the way to do that is to make this smaller, like maybe 40. My final score, and of course it's not going to be that big. My final score will probably be something like a lot smaller, so whatever it's going to be. That looks pretty good to me, right? All right, so my game over and the final score comes underneath, but I don't want to see my final score either, and I want to control it, which means another option over here. So public final score label. Go to here. You can see that my game controller now has a final score label. I'll score into here. And at the beginning, I want to hide it, but then I want to show it. In the beginning, I want to hide it. And then down here, I want to show it. Right? But I also want to update it because my final score is going to say 999. This is something like this. This dot final score label dot text is equal to final score plus this dot score value, whatever the score value is. I'm accessing the score value. See if it works. So, bump. So I play, I get a score. It's another life. Ah, okay, I'm almost dead. Oh, definitely dead. All right. So the final score comes up, and it matches this one. I wanted to see that. That's why I kept it going. I can't get more score. That's just silly. I got to stop the game now, right? So how do I do that? Well, first of all, I want to get rid of my score, right? Live label and my score label, I can get rid of them the same way. Over, I want to get rid of them. I want to say score label, game object, set active. So those are the ones I turned on. These ones I turned off. This dot lives label, game object, set active, and I also want to turn off my plane and my island, because that kind of makes it so that I exploded or something. right? Difficult to get rid of those. Let's be honest. So what do? Don't have access to my plane, and I don't have access. I don't have access to my my island here, right? So let's make it happen. So I'll make another little header in here. So I say header, and then instead of, I'll say game objects, and then we'll say a public game object is my plane, game object, which is my island. I added those two in there, so now we know what to do with those, right? So I'm going to get the reference later. I'm going to say, well, now that I have those, I'm going to say this dot, plane dot set active, because I can do it right there because it is a game object, is false, and this dot island dot set active. So turn those off, so you can't see the plane or the island anymore. Okay, but now I need references. So even my game controller, if you wait, I'll have. So I'm going to take my game objects from my plane and my island. Those game objects, and then save. Okay, let's see if that works. So I play, la la la. Okay, that's good. Oh, I was almost tempted there. They're just trying to trick me, try and get that island, right? And I'm barking around, trying to get some points. Man, it's just hard. And see if I can get a better score. Those groupings of things. Oh, almost died. Another one. Let's see if I can get like points. Okay, and then okay, died. See, it's too fast. I can cheat too. I can go one of these, right? Like this. See that? Yeah, like this, I guess. Right, see? So now my game is stopped. I got 2,100 points. But there's a way of stopping the cheating, eh? And then you won't be able to, it won't allow you to get more points until until the island resets. There's ways of checking those things out. But now it's stopped, and I want to start over again. I like this, but I want to start over again. I need some kind of button or control to get me to start over. Was that? No, that's not good. I want to add a button. All right, so I'm going to right-click on the canvas, and I'm a new UI. Here's a new thing you've never seen before: button. And here's my button. Okay, I'm going to put this button. Now the button's pretty ugly, and we're going to call this the restart button. Restart button. It needs to say inside the restart button, it actually has a text object. We're going to change this text object to say restart. Right? Label if you want to be technical. Right? And in here, this is going to say restart. Of course, this is boring because the text is terrible. Change my text to be the same. So here's my font size, Doc 51, put it in there. Oops. And I want to change the start button so it's yellow as well. So do one of these. So I'll just do 55. And now my font is wrong. Let's turn this back to black. Sorry, I meant to do the back end. I meant to go with the other one, with the restart button itself. It has a color. So here's the normal color. Has the color itself. That's the color of the object. Go back here and make it all yellow, right? 255. And the other one is that the button size is really small, so I don't like that from a restart label perspective. And I want to make it kind of like this. And if I look at this one, the final score is 40, 30, right? So here's my restart label. So I want to make this, the size of it's got to be 40. Put this in like this. If I go 40, you can't see anything anymore. Why? Because that means my button has to be bigger. It'll be like 50. And I might as well make this about 200 make it like nice. Maybe move it down a little bit. Maybe space these out just a little bit. What I want to do is kind of take all these three things and move them towards the center a little bit more, just to kind of make it like this. That's probably the center. Maybe make just a little bit lower. There we go. Okay, that's my UI. So if I press play, again, you'll see my button. This is what it looks like. A bit of an effect on it. I want a hover effect. But again, I don't want to show my restart button until, which means I need control, which means I need to add some kind of way of restarting it. Right? It's not a label, and maybe I can say, instead of labels, I can call this UI, whatever you want. I'm making this easier for you guys to see. So instead of, again, in my header, I can call this objects. So in here, I'm going to put a button. Oh, how about public? And then it's going to be called restart button. Okay, so down in here, when I start the game, I'm going to make it false. You can't see it. This dot game object dot set active false. And of course, down here, when all this is set to true, I want to make this set to true too. So this dot start button object dot set active. Let's try this out. But of course, I'm missing one thing. I need a reference to my button. Notice to change the UI objects. Right button, restart button there. Now it's a little different of a symbol. This is a T. This looks like a button. Save and play. So get some points and then die, die, die. Let's die, 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 die. And now I got my restart button, but it doesn't do anything yet. Right? I'm in. Right? My restart button. So how do I do that? I got to click my restart button, and so I need a click event from my restart button. Well, luckily, the restart button itself has the ability for you to add events on the bottom. On click, the list is empty. Well, the trick is you need to create a method that's public that it can access. So I'm going to call this, of course, restart button click. Now, you can call it whatever you like, but it makes more sense. And I'm going to put it in my game object, in my game controller, my game controller script. And at the bottom, that's where I have my public methods. Underneath here, I'm going to put it in. I'm going to say public void restart button. You don't have to do it this way, but I think it's just see afterwards. And what do I want this thing to do? Well, I want to restart my scene. Oh, well, I do, but I don't know. I need to have the name of my scene if I want to restart it. Okay, so the funky way to do this, before we get to write this thing in a second, I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Build Settings. Under Build Settings, notice that I have no scenes in my build. Main, right? But I know that I'm going to need more scenes eventually. So instead of calling it main, let's call it the game scene. Makes more sense, right? So here's my scenes. First of all, before we do this, let's save my scene and save my project. Because if I don't save my scene, my project, I'm going to scream, right? Okay. How do I rename? Click once, and then rename it to whatever it is, game. Now that I have the name of my scene, I'm going to go back to build settings. I can drop my scene into my scene in my builds. You okay? So now that I've got my scenes in my build, right? I'm going to save this. I'm not going to build yet. I want to save this, close this. You cannot get the name of your scene unless the scene is actually dragged and dropped into your build, into that build settings. Then I can actually call the name of my scene, game, scene manager. Okay? On that, I need to be able to have control of my scenes. In order for me to do that, I have to have another reference. Manage my scenes, right? Which is Unity engine management. That's what's another using that I got to add in. So UI for my user interface, scene management to switch scenes. Now, when I go down, if I go to here, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to say, scene manager, cut, load scene, which is game. Done. So I'm going to click on the button, and it's going to reload my scene. Let's check this out, make sure it works. And then we'll save it to GitHub. So go like this, run. I hit a couple lives there. Or I might get, I don't know if I got, oh, I'm not even going to get a point. Okay, oh, I'm just crazy. Okay, I can do that. Oh, there we go. Now I want to restart my game. Oh man, what happened? I have to tell the game where to start. So here's my restart button. I made the script, but it didn't point to it. Plus button. And I got to choose which game object has my script that I want to use. So I'll click on this. Game controller, right? And in my game controller, I can choose the function, which is under my game controller called restart button click. Cool, let's try this again. Run. Okay, a little bit luckier this time. It's arcade game, right? And then, oh, there we go. And then, oh, okay, and then do it. Oh, okay. There we go. Cheating, right? I'm cheating because I can do that with this kind of this version of the game, right? And later on, if you really want to, we can, not today, but we can fix it, okay? We can try and do that so we can get as many points as possible because we can run over the island a couple times. Okay, of course, die, right? So now if I restart my game, bam, I'm restarted again. Nice and easy, right? Same scene. I don't have to do it this way. I could certainly do it in alternate scenes and other scenes, right? And of course, I'll die, and I'm dead. There isn't really any kind of, I've done the game, I'm pretty much done, that I haven't finished yet. One is I want to stop and I want to upload this to GitHub because as we go, we should continue to work with GitHub, right? So I've added my UI, right? So I want to say file, save scene, file. I'm going to quit Unity, right? And I'm going to add it into GitHub. So I'm going to go back to my GitHub. And I'm going to say clear the screen, git add dot. Everything git commit -m added UI, right? Push origin master. By the way, I could have many more times in this thing because I just didn't add. I could have pushed when I added a button. I could have pushed when I added my labels. I could have pushed when I added my score and my lives. I could have pushed when I did a bunch of stuff, and I didn't because just to save time. So I've done all this. I want to restart Unity. And I need some kind of feedback for the user to know that he failed. So we're going to make that funky sound now, actually. There we go. All right, so I want to play a sound, and I want to play it when the game is over. It's going to play a sound that goes or something like that. But I don't have that sound, so I want to make it. For now, so you won't be able to hear me as nice, but you'll be able to hear the sound here in the room. So how do I do it? I'm going to open up, which is what I recommended for you guys to make or modify sounds. Right? I'm going to record my sound, right? And I'm going to make my sound just from my voice. Ready? Here we go. Okay. Great thing is you can always play it back. So if I play it back. Okay. Yeah. But what I can do is cut this stuff off. So I can kill this piece, right? So let's kill this part of it by cutting it out. And I can cut this piece off. I could actually be more careful right there. Let's cut it from here to about there. And then cut that out. And now if I play it, it's shorter. Oh, there we go. Not very exciting, right? But maybe if we add an effect, like we can change the pitch lower, right? So let's try that. All right, cool. And we'll slow it down a little bit, right? So press OK to accept the effect. I'm going to change my speed down to something like this, -27, and then preview. Okay, that's good enough. It's not as nice as the first time, but it's okay. I know. And then you can also add other things too. We didn't do other things we can add in, like the phaser effect, right? Like if you want to add it in, right? You can change some of these values, so I can make a bunch of stages and continue to add in different effects, right? Until I think it's more what I want. You want that too?
I don't know.
So I have the phaser effect. There it is. And let me add in, maybe I'll make the speed a little higher. Now this is bad because I've changed everything. Speed, tempo. There we go. I'll make the tempo higher, which is different than the speed. There we go. Press OK. So now I've accepted that. This is my little thing that I want to make in. It's new. I want to add maybe an echo effect. I'm playing now, right? No. Right? And then now I want to export. So I want to say export. And it's going to ask me what kind of file. I can use ogg vorbis files. I can also export to MP3. MP3, you need a plugin that doesn't come with Audacity by default. You have to get the plugin. But I'm going to choose ogg vorbis because everything else is ogg vorbis for myself, which is just an open source sound, right? So I'm going to just choose my game over sound. Game over. Pick the right place because right now it's pointing to the other one that I did today. So I'm going to go to desktop and Unity projects and Nailpilot D, assets, inside audio. That's where it's going to go. My game over ogg vorbis. And when I save, it's going to ask me what my name is, which is going to be called game over. And my album type, and I did another game, Starbase 12, but I will do another one called, we'll just say this one's Nailpilot. It's 2016 this time. Did it right this time. And it's an arcade game. It's track 1. Sure, and press OK. It's going to save. And when it does, audio, it's going to have my game over sound now. Right? I don't have to keep this anymore, so I can close it down. Or I could have saved it. And I got my sound that I want. But I want it to play when the game is over. Now, it can't happen when my plane is around because my plane is gone. The plane is gone, so the sound can't be on my game. The sound's got to be on my game controller. Really important to make, right? So I want to add it as another object that's inside my game controller. So add a component. I could do add component audio source, or because it's only the first audio source, game over in there. And I want to move this above my game controller script. So I'm going to move it up. There it is. And this time I'll do it programmatically. So I'll just call upon it programmatically to play. As an example, at the bottom over here, when this endgame script is called. So programmatically, when I want to make it happen, I got to create an object, right? And I'll call it end game sound or something like that. Game sound. So it won't be an integer. It'll be an audio source. So it's end game sound. I don't have that yet. A reference to that. I'll just do it a little differently, just just to do it differently. So I'll say this dot end game sound to this dot game object or get component. Sorry, audio source because there's only one. It's a reference to the game object to the audio to the end game sound, and then down in here, I do all this, and I'm going to play my sound at the end. This dot end game sound dot play. To the end game, it's going to play the end game sound. Check it out. See if it works. what happened? I forgot to take my play on a wake off. Let's try that again.
Yay. 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 Yay.
It works. It's not beautiful, but she works, right? All right, so we got this. We can restart the game by clicking the restart button. And I want to put it out to you guys as well, is my problem is that there's no way of getting to the button. I can't start the game anyway. I'm thrust right into my game. And that's not really a good thing when you play a little arcade game. You want to give a player a chance to get ready. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. We can do another overlay of Mail Pilot and a start button, right? I want to restart my scene. And I want certain things to happen. Like, for example, I want to enable my clouds to go, as an example. I want to instantiate my clouds. If I restart and I go back to where I asked for the start button again, it'll show the start button, right? So I don't want that. I want to get kind of restart my game again all the time. So if we have a separate scene. Okay. If we do a separate scene, this is the opportunity in the future, which is, again, this is a lead-in to next week, where we can do a separate scene for each of our states. This is our play state, and I'm kind of doing a game over in our play state. Scene 2. Game over, whole different scene, and then starts over again, right? For now, all I want to do is make one more scene, right? Just because we've never done multiple scenes before, right? And I would add it in before this one. Here's the trick. Earphones on so you can hear me a little better, because when I record, you're going to hate it if you hear me like this. What I want to do is I want to duplicate my scene. So here's my scene. And why do I want to duplicate it? Because it's far easier for me to remove components than for me to reset the camera, change my aspect ratio, and do all that work again. I did all this work to get it the way I want it. Why would I just not copy it and then change the stuff that I don't want? That's the better way. So let's do that. So I can't duplicate it from here, from the menu. It won't give me a chance to do that. And if I click, Control D or Command D, right, I can do it that way too. My menu and click duplicate. That'll work. I want to rename the scene, and I want to call this menu. Never get there right now, right? It'll never get there because in my build settings, I have my game as the first one. I want to make my menu as my first scene. Up, right? My menu goes first, and then my game scene. Okay. You can pop from one scene to the other by double clicking. So if I go game scene, menu, then my menu scene, game. But the problem is they look the same right now. Let's get rid of stuff. Like, for example, I really don't need my game controller in my menu scene. I need something else because my game controller is going to control other things. Controller. I'm also going to get rid of my plane. And I'm also going to get rid of my island. Okay. Next slide. I don't need lives, so I'm going to get rid of those. My score, right? I want to change my game over label, so it's not a game over label. It's a Mail Pilot label. So it's going to just say Mail Pilot, Mail Pilot, right? And I want to get rid of this. Get rid of this. I want to change it. So instead of restart button, start button. There we go. And this won't be restart label. It'll be the start label. There we go. And I'll call this start. There we go. Looks the same. So I've got my same look and feel. The ocean going in the background to kind of give me a kind of a starting point for my game, right? Now what I need is the chance for me to double click or click on this thing to start my game. I can't use my game object anymore, my game controller. I got rid of it for a couple of reasons. It doesn't fit. We need something else. a menu controller. So let's add that in. So add a new empty game object called menu controller. Let's pull it out here. And I want to pull this to the top somewhere underneath my main camera. And I'll reposition it in the middle of my screen. And what I want to do here in my menu controller is add a script. So I have another script. And create a new C# script called. And I'm going to pull my script, again, just from a best practice perspective, into my other object. Now, instead of menu controller like this, I can kind of give it a space. It's OK. If I actually type everything in properly. There we go. All right, so now if I double click my menu controller, I want to do a couple things. I know I'm going to be modifying my scene, which means I've got to add a using statement reference to management, scene management, which is using security engine scene management. I need that. And here somewhere, I'm going to make a public methods. Right? I know I'm going to do this because I already did it for my other one, which is going to be a public a method called something like start button click, right? Because when I click the button, it's going to take me to my other scene, right? And I'm probably going to call my scene manager again. So scene manager, load scene, and then I'm going to call the game scene again. I did the other one. So when I click the button, it's going to take me to my load scene. Okay, but do I need to reference my button here? The answer is no, I don't. Here, all my button has to do is point to which object is going to be the one that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to click on my menu controller. I'm going to choose the function for my menu controller, which is going to be called start button click. Save. Let's try it out. And I'll pilot. Start.
Yay. 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 Yay.
And restart.
Yay.
And you can play at your heart's content, the full game.
Yay.
Questions? So that's the full way of doing it, from the beginning, from the scratch, all the way to getting your button, your UI. It's a very simple UI, by the way. We're going to go into more complex user interfaces when we do 3D. I want to make a 3D user interface that kind of pops out at you at an angle, creating a heads-up display. We'll do that with a 3D part. With the when we do our platformer example, when we get to that piece, we can add other elements of UI. The UI can pop up to tell you what to do with a little bit of animation, like pick up the object, jump over the pit trap. You know, those kind of things. It tells you what to do. You can actually have UI elements in your scene to help you, again, because the first part of when you play any kind of game is the tutorial level. You can think about this as the first part of our level. We can have a tutorialize, or the first part of our level, so that way we can play the game. We know what to do to play the game. Otherwise, it's going to be like Terraria we're doing, right? We got to figure out how to do stuff, right? Do some other games, right, where they don't tell you anything, right? They don't give you any kind of information on what to do, and you kind of like fool around until you figure it out, right? And it should also be kind of in a safe environment too, right? Where it stops you, right? That's weird. Kind of just stopped. Let's save the scene and save the project and close Unity. Then we'll do is I'll update everything online. So I'll say add dot git commit -m. I'll say added menu scene. There we go. And git push master. I'll push everything that I just did up on GitHub for you guys, except for the build. We have to check that. That's the last thing we do. Let's run the build again. It was weird that it stopped for a second. It's like Unity crept out. I never do dash U. Dash U is unconditional. So it kind of replaces. I want to increment the next one, the next one, the next one, so I can keep track of all my changes. Okay, I want to do my WebGL build now because that's one of the requirements of the assignment. The assignment, part of the assignment is I need my external document for assignment 1, and I need a WebGL build. Those are the 3 things. And I want to put all these things up on eCentennial, right? All right, how do I do a WebGL build? So I'm going to go File, have my 2 menus, my 2 scenes. I need to have all my scenes here listed. WebGL. The other thing to do is in my settings, my player settings, I got to make sure that this is correct, 640 by 480, which I've opened ahead of time. You can also add in some default icons in here, as well as company information, right? For example, your company information, you should probably put in there the name of your, what kind of phantom company or fantasy company you're using for your logo. You can put your logo icon in here, all kinds of stuff, put it in there. And you can also do other things here, like your splash image, if you want some other splash images. Now notice that we cannot a splash screen because we're using the personal educational build, right? If you'd be able to change this to make your own splash screen, right? There's other settings here from a rendering perspective. You can change these as well, and error logging. We can change those things as well, like full script logging, and also publisher settings. What kind of memory we're going to assign to our WebGL memory, because especially when it comes to 3D, we want to increase this amount so it can actually do stuff, right? Because it's not enough. Be careful, crash your machine, right? And those are the things. Now I can do a build. Now, I want to do a build and run. That's what I really want to do. Now, on the Mac, it's a little different than Windows. I need to create a new folder, right? And I'm going to call this builds, capital B. It's going to ask me what I want to save it as, GL. You see, all you have to do is make a new build and point to the folder, and it'll make the WebGL build for you. Now, this takes time, like we talked about before. As it does the build, remember, for the exam, you're going to have to do this build, WebGL build. So you need to know how to do it. It's part of everything that we're doing here. The only thing we haven't done is published. At the end of the day, we haven't published to an app store or someplace like that. Very well, take the build from your game, the piece parts for your game, especially as long as your index.html is exposed, and put it up on a website somewhere, and it would work. You can try it on Azure, but the problem with Microsoft Azure is it sometimes will refuse to do certain things because you need extra information in your web.config file. By doing it, you can actually do an auto deploy from GitHub, right, to Azure, build only, right? But again, for now, let's wait till this is done. So you can see that this is going, right? 3 pieces. You need your external document, and it should have all the things we talked about before, like, for example, your wireframes, screenshots, all the pieces that I've asked for in your assignment document. And your GitHub doesn't have to include builds, because the only place I need builds, and I'll tell you what to do. You're going to have to zip it up, your this particular build, and put it up on eCentennial. That's something you're going to submit. As you can see, this takes quite a bit of time. Again, so from a stats perspective, I have an i7, the RAM. I'm not virtualizing right now. It's on the metal, right? And I've got an SSD. Okay, so it's going to take time. That's why exam, like I said earlier, I'm not going to give you the full scope of the exam to do everything and then find out at the end that we don't have time to do our build, because the next class is going to be coming in. Now, in this particular case, it's not for you guys I'm saying this. It's for the previous class. So Ashley's class, like it'll finish a little earlier because, right? And you have to finish your exam before the other one starts, right? There's also, I might give you both first class and the second class. To be fair, fair, right? So there might be two different kinds of exams, two flavors, right? One flavor, some of you may get the other flavor, just to make it so it's more fair. Otherwise, theoretically, you could have someone in the morning class say, hey, here's what you do, right? And you're done. So you may see that there might be two flavors of exams, but you have to be ready to do both, right? And I'll talk about them during exam review. Will be on week 6, so a couple weeks from now, right? It's week 4, 2 weeks from now, right? I'll do a bit of an exam review in a couple weeks, and then I'll talk about, here we go, here's your WebGL build. I'll talk about, this would have been your splash screen, okay? And if everything works well, if I click start, I want to hear the sounds, and I do. So everything works exactly the same way. It restarts, dies again. And also, it's not responsive, because one of the things to note is screen. So it would not work on mobile. Doesn't mean we can't make a game to work on mobile that's WebGL build. I've chosen a fixed aspect 640 by 480. But you could make a game that's aspect, that uses aspect, and does not use a pixel perfect game. It would stretch and squash, right? I could, though, make this full screen if I click full screen, right? And you can see that the clouds would go drift off the screen. Like literally, it's going to try and do whatever it can, right? Which produces a bit of a problem for me. On this, so if you, I mean, remember the WebGL build is really just for me, so I can test your game quickly, and I don't have to build your game and download and install Unity for your version. Maybe you get a PC, or maybe you're using putting it on Linux or whatever you're doing. I don't want to be monkey around with that. I just want to run your game and make sure it goes. But I can play it here. If I go play and notice it, I have a problem because I've stretched my mouse. Offset is wrong, right? So we're going to fix that now. We didn't have a chance to do that in the beginning. Can I get out of full screen mode? Now it's okay. So we have this bit of a problem, this workaround with the mouse, right? Because I didn't want to use that line casting, ray casting stuff. So one of the things that I want to do is, it's just because of the build. That's what happened, right? Okay, so I've done a build. This is a perfect time for me to stop and update GitHub. Remember that I've got a gitignore file. Let's see what happens. Let's see if actually GitHub gets anything. It does. It gets a bunch of meta files. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to file, save scene, file, save project, and if I go back to GitHub, and if I click on list, I can see that there are changes. It dot. Okay, that's really long. It's too long. Look at what else happened. So let's git commit added WebGL build. Should not add the build folder because I said don't add build, right? In my gitignore. These are all the things it's adding. Notice that there's a ton of other stuff in the library shader cache. I wonder if that added my. I think it did add my build. But anyways, let's see what happens. Git push origin master, right? And I put it up now. You can see that's 5 meg, and 6 meg, 7 meg, 12 meg. It's way bigger than it was before because the build. And let's see what happened with it. Why did I get the build? Because I put a gitignore file up. But sometimes, things happen that go beyond your control. And they're good. See, didn't add the build. Here's my library, but there's no build. It just added more stuff in my library. You don't want to not include your library because that would be bad. So it's okay. I don't mind this because I don't have my build. It didn't add my build. And even that was like 12 megs. So what do I do with my WebGL build? How do I get it? I know that it exists inside of my top that's where I put it in my Unity projects. You have to know where yours is. It's under builds, okay? WebGL. Now for you, you might have a project like this as well. All I want to do here is I want to zip it up. So you can right click and compress. Or if you're a PC, you can right click, and if you use 7-zip, you can make it into a zip file. And you would just take this whole WebGL folder, eCentennial. That's what I would need you to do. Just this. Why? Because even without Unity running, again, I can run this thing. I can right click and I can open it up. I won't be able to open it with Chrome. So if I click Firefox, it'll open up the browser and try and run the file, right? So with nothing running, it'll launch Unity. And there we go. So even with nothing running, it'll do this, right? So I've got a WebGL build. Now I'm going to talk about how to make another one. What if I make changes right now? Can it update my WebGL build? Will it update my WebGL build? Will it do it the right way? If you need to update, and you do it a lot of times, and if you've made a couple of WebGL builds, or if I added more scenes, kill WebGL, or kill the whole builds folder and do it again. Why? Because sometimes it'll hold over some additional files that you don't want, and you'll have a really weird situation where it works locally and then remotely. It's like, I don't know why, but I'm still getting what I had there from before. I didn't update somehow. With that, please. Sometimes it's easy just to get rid of the whole directory. I'm just talking strategies here. Okay, let's go back into Unity. We have to do some additional things, some extra effects, if you will. One of the things that I want to do, and I didn't have a chance to do this earlier, but I do suspect we're going to finish a little earlier today, guys, than normal. I want to pull down Unity again, and I want to put it up again, right? When I pull up Unity, I want to change my player controller objects. It only uses my regular input, right? So it's not going to use mouse anymore. And I'm going to go back to making it use my board. Okay. You can use both. You can have your mouse to shoot weapons like we've done before, and the keyboard is strictly going to be for motion. If I want to get things like jump moving, okay, if I want to move, and if it's not physics-based method, if it's physics-based, for example, if I'm falling or something like that, or I'm doing any other kind of collisions or weird effects, like bouncing off things or whatever, fixed update method, which is better because it's consistent. This is kind of best effort. Update gives you kind of the best effort every frame, right? Which is fine for movement. Okay, so how do I do this? First of all, what I want to do is I want to put together additional code. So let me go back to my scripts. Here's my plane controller. And the way we move our plane right now, like this, I have my transform, right? And what I'm doing is I'm saying something like this. I'm saying, well, on move, I want to change my position based on the position of my mouse. I do transform my position, and whatever my mouse is, I want to move. That's what my plane controller does, right? Right here, this is the X coordinate of my mouse position. But this is fixed, so 290 and 90. So really, all I care about for my plane is the X component. I can't really go forward and back, right? So all I need is input.getAxis horizontal. That's all I need, which is the horizontal axis. Okay, where do I get that from? This last time. So if I go to my edit, and I go to project settings, and I go to input, you can see that all the axes are listed here. For example, horizontal has the following keys: my left arrow and my right arrow. Alternative negative button is A. Alternative positive button is D, right? So you can have these or change them around the way you like, okay? Just pointing it out to you. Get axis and stuff. So when I say horizontal, I'm using a dictionary definition to access the left or right, and I can take them away. So if I don't want my arrow key to work, I can take these away. It's up to you. So that's what I want to do, and I want to use left or right to move, but not up and down, not vertical. My vertical axis isn't going to be touched, so I'm not going to engage that at all. We're going to do the fire button and all that later on, another time. That's the first thing. So I want to put that in here. Whatever I'm going to get, I'm going to clamp it so it's not so crazy. And I want to be able to capture my current position, because I'm going to make a difference between my current position, and I want to make a vector change between my current position, my new position, whatever that's going to be, right? So I need a couple things. I need a private transform, which I already have, right? I also need a vector2 object. Remember, vector2 is x and y. That's what it stands for, right? Which is my current position. So a transform and a current position. Okay. In my update, before I do my move, right? My move, what I want to do, it doesn't matter. I want to do one of these. I want to say this dot underscore current position to this dot underscore transform. So the current transform of my object and the current position of my object, basically, is what it's going to be. That's number one. I also want to assign another floating point, a private floating point object, right? So where is it? And it's going to be a private float, right? Which is going to be my player input. So player input. I want to keep track. My player input varies from -1, which goes to the left, to 1, which goes towards the right. And it's all things in between, all those positions in between. So I want to take this, and I want to be able to move one way or the other. The other thing I want to use is the speed that I'm moving, my player speed. So I'll say private float. I'll say speed, not negative, speed. So for my player speed, and I'm gonna kind of, in my start method, I'm going to initialize that to about 7 right now. Okay, you can make it 7 or 5 or something. 7 units. Call it whatever you like. I've got my transform. I've got my player. Now what I want to do is inside my move, after I get my current position, something like this. I'm going to say this dot underscore player input is equal to, before I make a change, is equal to dot get axis, and inside there it's going to be horizontal. So I'm getting horizontal movement, horizontal input from my A and D buttons or my left and right arrows. That's all I'm doing here. And I'm getting a value number between -1 and 1, whatever that's going to be. Okay, now input is greater than 0. Am I going to go? So let's try this out. So I'm going to say this. I'm going to say if this dot underscore player input is greater than 0, I'm moving, right? I'm not touching the buttons at all. Then, which way do I want to go? Towards the right. What do I do with that? I can say, well, this dot underscore current position, right? To new vector2 object, right? I'm going to add a vector2 object, which is this speed, x direction, and then I'm not going to add anything to the y. So it's going to, the y is, nothing's going to add on to the y. So I'm adding vectors here because my current position is a vector, as x and y coordinates, right? So I'm adding x and y's to x and y's, and I don't know if you guys remember vector addition, but all I'm doing is I add the x components and the y components. That's all I'm doing. Saying, hey, take my speed and add it to my current position. That's all I'm doing. So I'm actually physically changing my location. I haven't done it yet, though. Here, if I say if it's positive. Otherwise, if it's negative, again, you can put this in an else. I guess you could put either one or the other, right? But I'm gearing you guys up for any kind of movement. That's why I'm using if statements, right? So if my player input is less than 0, I could have made this an else as an example, right? I'm going to say this dot underscore current position, right? Just like we saw, it's minus equals to a new vector2 object, right, which is this dot underscore speed. So again, there's a little bit of duplication here, which we probably can get rid of. So depending on the sign, if we're positive or negative, we're going to move to the left or to the right. What I want to do, right, is, and this is the current position, is I want to say my transform position is equal to the new position, right? Going to be have an x and y coordinate. Huh. My current position, but my transform position, all I care about is the x coordinate. Current position, the x component of my current position is going to go right in here. So I could do that. So I say this dot underscore current position dot x. I'm going to subtract 320 because that was my offset, right? And I'm going to still clamp between 90 and 290 because that's the edges of my screen. That's just my check bounds, right? And notice that second object, my minus 200, is where I'm on my screen. So my vector 2 object is going to be the position, minus 200. And minus 290 by 290 is the x, the clamp of my x. I can't go beyond on the x-axis or greater than 290, right? Let's see if that works. So there's no more mouse. Mouse is gone. If I'm right, then when I push play,
Yay.
now I'm using my
Yay.
it's much harder.
Yay.
Also notice that I kind of go out for a while. 7, right? If I want to change this up, and let's say, for example, I think 7 is too much for my speed. I want to make it 5. I'll open this up, try again. Remember, it's depending on how long I press it too, right? Because it increases the time. Now here's something that they did in the first tutorial. I don't know if you noticed the first tutorial. They don't care in 0 and 1. You're still going to get 1. And what they do in the first tutorial, which is actually quite neat if you actually look at it, is they clamp. They give you the identity of whatever it is. If I'm moving to the right, add 1, multiply it by my speed. Then what they do is they slow you down after a time. They add force. So when you press on the button, you actually move according to force. They translate you as opposed to changing position the way I'm doing it. No. Go 5 pixels to the right. That's what I'm doing. That's totally different than what they're doing earlier. Also, it doesn't work the same way. One of the challenges one of the students had in the beginning class, in the first class, was they were trying to do the twin stick shooter that I originally had put in for assignment 1, like the tutorial. They tried to do that piece pixel perfect. Well, what's the problem with that? What would you say is the problem with using pixel perfect, background with the twin stick shooter the way it was made in the first tutorial? Anybody? Huh? You can adjust. It's just because it's pixel perfect. No, it's so small. The amount of force you have to put in has to multiply by like 100. 100 times to 1, right? So that's why you can't move at all with you won't be able to see any movement at all in your twin stick shooter. If you tried to take the same mechanics from the twin stick shooter and put it in this game. And we're going to have the same problems, like I said before. When we go to a platformer, we're not going to do a pixel perfect platformer with that, especially when it comes to gravity. Because as we jump and we come back down, we'd have to multiply that falling rate by like 50. And it's going to be weird. All of our forces are going to be multiplied by like 100, right? Which doesn't make any sense. And I'd rather use the game engine to give us our physics as opposed to me multiplying things by 100. Okay, so this is my last change to MailPilot for today. Project, file, save scene, right? And I'm going to quit Unity. Oh, one more change to make. Sorry. Let me go back up into Unity one more time. The change I wanted to make was a build. I want to build it again and show you the problem, because again, you might try and build it again, and you're like, oh, Tom, it didn't work. It worked before, but it doesn't work now. Let me tell you I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Do it again. I'm going to go File, Build and Run, right? And it's going to go through, look at the menu items, and build and run me again. put it out there right now to you, it'll fail, right? Because I already have a build folder, right? And it's easier sometimes just putting it out there that you need to just remove that folder altogether and do a whole new build and run, right? Because there's nothing left over. There's nothing in there anymore. So it's not going to try and maintain something that was there before. It's longer to do because you're not updating, right? But the great thing is it'll still build and run. So I want to check it. I made a major change because now my controls are changed to use the mouse. My mouse won't even work at all anymore. Now it's strictly a keyboard game. By the way, it's more compatible this way with, yes. You can, but that means you get both inputs. So your mouse will move and so your keyboard. That's why the twin stick shooter idea, we did use both. But the way they did it on the twin stick shooter is they're using ray casting in a way to kind of get to the camera, wherever the camera is looking at, into that particular location for your mouse to get an exact location, right? Sometimes we need to do that with UI, right? In the UI settings, and we can't see it now because they're doing the build, but in the UI settings it says, do you want interactivity? And the answer would be yes, of course. If you don't want mouse interactivity, you can turn that off, especially when you're doing some kind of like a gamepad, using some kind of gamepad, like an Xbox controller or something, right? You wouldn't want that anymore. You care about a mouse interactivity, the thing that's controlling it, right? Maybe you're gonna have certain buttons to do everything. Press A to go to the menu, press B to go to this, press C as an example, and then maybe X, to do something else. X to exit the menu, right? A to accept, right? Like that kind of stuff. All right, so we got our WebGL builds, the final builds. Gotta click the button to start. And now I'm moving with the mouse, the keyboard. So it's a good build. Way harder, by the way. I've gotten this part done. I'm gonna stop this. I'm gonna go back to here. I'm gonna stop the build, file, save scene, file, save project, close Unity, and go back to here. Hit add dot. Hit commit. I'll wait for it. Find its M, and I'll say changed to keyboard controls, keyboard input. Sorry, my quote. There we go. And then origin master. There we go. Pushed everything up. You can see that it's still 7 megs instead of 12 for whatever reason, right? And we're good to go. It's stopped. Okay. I've got my build, right? So here's my WebGL build. I'm looking at builds. And if I go back up one, so if I go builds, right? Here's my builds. Here's my project, right? Web, I can't put this whole project on the web. It's impossible, right? I only want to put this WebGL piece up. I would right-click, copy, right? And I'm going to put it on my desktop. Let's see if I can find a free desktop for a second. Hold on a second. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to put it on my desktop. So there's my WebGL build. All this thing, smart like I am, right? Mail pilot. Okay, this is my mail pilot final. Repository for this. So if I go in here, as my index, it's exposed on the root, right? My release and my template data. That's all I have. I want to bring up something like Visual Studio Code again, right? I want to drop this in here. So drop this in there. My index.html it's just a regular HTML page. And what it does is it loads the unityloader.js file, my release folder. So I can't get rid of my release folder. These the way they are. Okay, that's one. Second, I want to bring up a new terminal. What I want to do, pull this into there. And I want to git init. I want to create a new repository for this one. Git add dot. Okay, pretty big. Git commit. I'll say initial commit. Good. Now I need a repository to do. So I'm going to go to plus new repository, and I'm going to say 305 fall 2016 final. Right? I'm going to grab these two lines, and I'm going to go and put them inside my folder, my terminal. So I'm going to clear. Make sure it's the right one. So it'd be very bad if it was the wrong one, right? Okay, and then clear, paste. We'll go back, get that again. Copy, paste, enter. When you origin, while it's doing that, I'm going to go up and open up what I'm going to call it, Azure. So here's Azure, and now you guys can play the game in a second. So here, and of course I should probably sign in. There we go. I want to click new. I want to go to, by the way, this is not required. So this is required, web and mobile, web app. I'm going to call this web app mail pilot so you can access it. COMP305 fall 2016 mail pilot, like nice and long, so that way it's unique, right? On Green Spark, I'll use an existing, right? And I'll put it up on dashboard and click create. So I'm just creating my container on the web. It's going to do its little dance to create a container up on, right? Now it's not connected, but I'm going to connect it in a second. I'm going to auto deploy between my GitHub repo and Azure. So every time I change my build, bam, it'll update my game on Azure. Let's try this out. Got to click on the left. You can see that there's going to be a place where it says deployment in this bloody thing. Deployment options. I'm going to choose GitHub. And then it's going to point to, instead of me, right? It's going to point to Centennial. I'm going to go to my first project. And do I see it here? Should show my project. So maybe it's not there. Maybe it's on me, which is this. That would be very bad. But it is what it is, if it's there. Yeah, it is. Okay, that doesn't matter. And now, when I put it up on my mail pilot, I'm going to click OK. What it's going to do is going to take stuff from GitHub and auto deploy it to Microsoft Azure. As soon as it's done, it says it's successfully done, but you got to give it a second, all right? So before it's successful, you got to wait until you see the check mark. Had any kind of cloud computing course with me before? Like for example, when we do things with any other, like for example, web game programming, then same thing. To wait till the cloud build's done. When the cloud build is done, we know it's been deployed. When the check mark is there, because it's not always working. Just wanted to check GitHub with you. Even though it's not showing anything, it's actually doing something. Yeah, see how the check mark is there? Okay, now if I go to my website, click on this link. And if everything goes well, right, this. Just give it a second while it loads. See, because it might not work, right? It takes time. And like I said, the funny thing about Azure is it has some funny, finicky things. Even if it says check mark, yeah, you're good, right? If I reload this, it says an error occurred running Unity content on this page. See your browser's JavaScript console for more. Header check, it says, right? So no matter how much I try and do it, like it may not work, and it could be because it's a Chrome browser as opposed to something else. And I go into Firefox and I put the same address in. Sometimes it may work, but it didn't. Other weird things that happen with, for example, any other site that I can run, it would work. So let's check out what the error is. I'll be honest with you, because it's not my issue. It's the build, right? That's why I don't ask you. I've never asked you to do a go put it up on Azure. I know there's problems, right? So if I click on console, you can say what it says. This failed to load resource. Responded with a status of 404 not found. It's trying to get this WebGL mem and this stuff, and it doesn't know what it is. Because you need to use a web.config file with Azure for it to run these things. It doesn't know what these are. Why it's not running. And if I was going to check this out, if I said Unity WebGL build on Azure, it might have, there might be a solution where there is an update to how to do that kind of stuff. I'm not sure that there is something here. Might be some kind of quick fix, and I'm guessing it's something in the web.config. This is 2015, where I may have to change one little thing and it'll run, right? That all the time, right? Port 80, yeah, all this stuff is the same, but I'm pretty sure it's something else. Here it is, MIME type. There we go. See? And this is what you put in the WebGL build. You want to add a MIME type to this, where it says application for type mem, because it doesn't understand what type mem is. Octet stream, and you do that in web.config. I won't fix it today, but I will fix it. I want to let you guys go because it's 4:40, and I want to end a little bit earlier compared to normal. But there is a way to fix it, and I put it up on Slack, and then I'll go up. Seriously, and I'll go up and I'll fix it, and I'll update another version up on Azure, and it'll be done. So all I have to do is go back into the terminal window, my little web config file, and it's good to go. And web config is just something that Azure requires because it doesn't understand what this is, so it's afraid it's a security issue. It'll say, no, I don't understand what this is. What are you trying to run? Maybe it's a virus, so it shuts it down. But it's not. It's a WebGL game, and we just talked about what kind of game, what kind of file it is. So check it out. If you can fix it, that'd be awesome. If you're really adventurous and you're a gamer, because I put it out there, if you can run it on Azure, I'll give you 4 bonus points. All right, if you want to try and do this, okay? Lots of bonus opportunity for assignment 1. I'll even do the same thing for assignment 2, assignment 3, and for your final project. Okay. And I'll see you next time. Remember, next week we're going to start with the project. All right. And your assignment 1 is due Monday at midnight. Good luck.